Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. Yes, I'm back in the hot seat after a few weeks' absence, so glad to be here. Joining me this evening on tonight's programme, we have a special guest this evening, Alan Brown, who's joining us from Westminster this evening. Good evening to you, Alan. How are you?
Hi, good evening. I'm very well, Gordon. Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome, Alan. And also joining us this evening, a regular contributor and well-known household name, Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Gordon. Good to see you back, fit and alive and kicking.
Yep, and hopefully going to stay that way, Chris. Anyway, I'm going to move on, first of all, with the coronavirus update. And as of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,910,765 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government's regional testing centres since the beginning of the pandemic. Of these, 1,685,082 have been confirmed negative, 225,683 have tested positive. There are only 204 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display the symptoms and not all those with the symptoms will be tested. There's only one reported death of a person who tested positive today. The number of patients in Scotland who've died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,654. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 75 were in hospital last night, 12 of whom were in intensive care. Now also, as of 8 o'clock this morning, 2,789,978 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 1,142,947 have received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show that 127,480 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness. This is an increase of 29 since yesterday. And this number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And now to National Records for Scotland update. As of the 25th of April, 10,078 deaths have been registered in Scotland where the coronavirus, COVID-19, was mentioned on the death certificate, according to statistics published by the National Records of Scotland today. In the week of the 19th to the 25th of April, 23 deaths were registered which mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate, a decrease of 1 death on the previous week. There were 7 deaths in Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board area, 4 in Lanarkshire and 3 in Lothian and Tayside. Now to tonight's main headlines and the general election. Nicola Sturgeon is asking voters to keep Scotland's NHS in safe hands. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, today asked the people of Scotland to vote to keep the NHS safe and highlighted the risk to the NHS of putting power in Tory hands. With the SNP Scottish Government currently offering an average pay rise of 4% to NHS Agenda for Change staff that would be paid within the first 100 days of a re-elected SNP government, the First Minister highlighted the insulting 1% rise on offer from the Tories, despite the extraordinary lengths the NHS staff have gone to over the past year. On a campaign visit to Eastwood, the SNP leader said it was essential that in the next week's election, people across Scotland vote to keep Scotland's NHS in safe hands. The First Minister said that she's asking the people of Scotland to help her to keep the Scottish NHS safe and out of Boris Johnson's hands. Ms Sturgeon added that if re-elected, the SNP would use all their experience in government to implement a full-scale remobilisation of the NHS with record levels of investment. She committed to keeping the essential services helping us through COVID, like test and protect, in public hands and not managed by private companies. Nicola Sturgeon said the Tory threat level to Scotland's NHS from a sleaze-ridden Westminster government is real, present and at its highest ever setting. Let me first of all turn to Alan Brown for a comment. Alan, I know that I've not interviewed you before, so let me have your initial reaction to Nicola Sturgeon's reiteration, I suppose, of her promise to keep the NHS in Scotland in its safe hands.
Well, it's clearly a very important promise. I mean, if you think how much Nicola cares about the Scottish NHS, given that she was the Health Secretary for a while before being First Minister, and you correctly highlighted the 4% wage rise pledge, which actually recognises the hard work done by NHS staff. But clearly this is about the bigger picture. this is why we need both votes SNP, because it's about protecting the NHS in the long run from any dirty Tory trade deals. At Westminster, the Tories refused to allow protection for the NHS and future trade agreements. So it's really important we get an SNP majority, which clearly is then providing that initial protection for the NHS, but it's about moving on then to a referendum and getting independence and making sure that it's an independent Scotland that's fully in control of all trade deals, and therefore the NHS would be fully protected.
Alan, many people in Scotland perhaps are unaware of the fact that the Scottish NHS is just as at risk as the UK's National Health Service, isn't it? Because although the Scottish NHS is run here in Scotland, its funding is primarily dependent on how the NHS and the rest of the UK is funded. Is that not correct?
That's correct in terms of we've got the Scottish Block grant, and then for any additional spend, it's based on the Barnett formula. And the Barnett formula is basically when Westminster decides if they need to spend more money on an issue in England, then we get a slice of that cake. But that doesn't allow proper long-term planning. It's a reactive, not a proactive measure. But also there's actually another issue about the NHS, and that's an internal market bill, which actually goes therefore back to any trade agreements that the Tories sign at Westminster, because the internal market bill is all about, in their minds, prevent a distortion in markets operating differently within the UK. So therefore the internal market bill, if the English NHS is up for grabs, then the internal market bill would also therefore be a route to accessing Scottish NHS.
Okay, worrying times indeed. Chris, I know that you have a great interest in preventing the privatisation of our public services. How important is it to you that the SNP keeps the NHS in control here and doesn't let the Tories get hold of it?
Well, I mean, it's wholly vital that the Scottish NHS remains autonomous from the English NHS. That from a start. I could also cite the fact that on Friday, just before May Day, the SNP Socialists have drawn up an affirmation for all prospective MSPs to sign, and one of those pledges or affirmations, shall we say, is all to do with the NHS. And pushing the Scottish Government to establish the radical sea change to the whole care sector, not just the NHS, but the care sector as a whole, in the round, and that goes from hospitals, it goes to social care, it also takes into a view of private care, where we really don't want private individuals operating care homes and all the rest of it for profit. Nicola's already pointed out the fact that the NHS in Scotland should not be operated on a profit making agenda. As we've seen down in Westminster, where you've got hospital contracts, procurement contracts given to Tory donors, and also the fact that we find that there's Tory ministers who are involved with various companies, such as Matt Hancock, I believe, yes. Had the company that he was involved in was his wife's. So I mean that whole issue of cronyism and sleaze should not be anywhere near the NHS. And if I could just make a very, very quick point, is the fact that NHS in Scotland should not be used as a political football, because at the end of the day, the NHS in Scotland is for all their citizens, not just the fair-minded nationalists like myself, if I dare use that word. It's for everybody, and it's also for everyone, regardless of faith and colour and creed and all the rest of it. So there is no profit in an NHS.
Okay, Chris. Well, I think you made that point very forcefully. Thanks very much for that. We're going to move on now and talk about the election again, I'm afraid, but this time the Scottish Greens, who have condemned Glasgow immigration dawn raids. The Scottish Greens have condemned dawn raids in Glasgow, which have seen refugee families taken from their homes and placed in detention centres. The Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie visited Maryhill Integration Network today alongside lead candidates for Glasgow, Kim Long and Nadia Kanyange, to discuss concerns about the Home Office's treatment of refugees and asylum seekers in Glasgow. Commenting, Patrick Harvie said, "It's very alarming that the Home Office carried out a dawn raid on a family in Glasgow last week. An act of forcing people out of their home and incarcerating them at a detention facility is bad enough, but to do so during the pandemic is utterly inexcusable." Meanwhile, in Westminster, all the SNP Glasgow MPs signed a joint letter to the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, condemning the use of dawn raids and asking for clarification whether there had been a change in the UK government's policy to allow these raids to happen. Now, let me come to you first of all, Alan, in Westminster. Now, you're obviously a little bit closer to the seat of power down there. Has Priti Patel answered these queries from these SNP MPs, or has she kept quiet so far about this?
She's kept quiet so far, which is no surprise. You know, it really is a concern when immigration policy is under the control of Priti Patel. Obviously, we thought dawn raids had been stamped out. We really hope there hasn't been a change in policy, but there's certainly an alarming turn of events. You just can't imagine anything worse than effectively your door getting broken down and a big group of police and officers coming in to effectively arrest you and take you out your home with no notice whatsoever. And obviously, in this case, there was a pensioner involved, so it really is inhumane. I'm dealing with a couple of constituents myself at the moment in terms of immigration cases. I just cannot imagine the trauma that would happen to them if they were to suffer that further down the line. It really is. It's terrible.
Alan, I was under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that there had been a kind of moratorium on this kind of raid agreed, at least in Scotland. Is that true, or am I thinking of something else?
No, that's true, and that's highlighted in the letter from my colleagues who have, you know, the 7 Glasgow MPs that have signed the letter. So they clearly had thought that they had that moratorium still in place. So it does beg the question, how could protocol either A, be breached, or why would protocol be changed without any notification? Either way, it's a complete failure of the system in terms of governance and reporting, and really Priti Patel's got some serious questions to answer.
Do you think, Alan, it's fair to say that this has been shrouded in secrecy on purpose, basically to catch the Scottish Government on the hop here and Glasgow City Council and other stakeholders who have an interest in protecting vulnerable people who are awaiting decisions on seeking asylum in this country? Have they? Do you think, is this a sneak attack? Is this something, perhaps a sign of things to come?
Well, I think that you've highlighted probably what's going on in the background, not only catch out stakeholders, so that in the Tory viewpoint that the stakeholders then can't hold up the process. So you catch out stakeholders, you catch out the victims who they're doing the dawn raids on, and their whole ethos is obviously trying to, in their minds, return people to other countries and do that as speedily as possible. It's indescribable, you know, how inhumane such an attitude is. And you always find it difficult to believe, like sort of Priti Patel herself, you know, her parents were immigrants to the UK, and I don't understand people whose mentality is let's pull up the ladder behind us and don't see other people as equal human beings and offer the same, you know, open society chances for others.
Okay, thank you, Alan. To you, Chris, and I know you always have had a very strong interest in the plight of migrants, but particularly the plight of people who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own countries. Now, surely a family like this would not have brought their entire family across to the UK and be living in Scotland waiting for a decision like this if they were not, you know, in fear of their lives. Nobody would take their entire family like this, would they?
Well, no, it's sometimes it's not possible to take your whole family, and let's be brutally honest, sometimes there is no family, basically because that family has been killed. Whether it's been in a war zone or it's been on the journey, in order to get here. And obviously, I'm speaking with my humanitarian hat on for the likes of Eastwood Refugee Aid. But this was a pernicious attack on, as you quite rightly point out, a pensioner, who was going about his business. And this happened at 7 o'clock in the morning, where, and at the end of the weekend, where, they obviously thought if we do it at the weekend, the person in question won't be able to get a hold of any advocacies or any lawyers or solicitors or anything like that. So it was deliberately timed, as these dawn raids are often deliberately timed. And as Alan says, it's the arc angel, even if you want to describe arch enemy of Priti Patel and her pernicious pursuit and demonising immigrants. Quite clearly, she doesn't see herself as an immigrant. And it's also a baffling thing. Funnily enough, I actually got blocked from Anas Sawar's Twitter because I asked him how he could support a British Empire that actually inflicted so much chaos and mayhem to his family's country of origins. He obviously took offence at that question, and it's something that I just don't understand. People have got certain allegiances, and that's fine. But also people have got their own empathy, and if let's call a spade a spade. If someone's bombing the Donald Duck out of Ayrshire and all the rest of it, no offence, Alan, but obviously the people in Ayrshire and the surrounding areas, they're going to run to the furthest most point in order to get away from that bombing. It is human nature. And also, if if you're able to do it, then obviously you take your family and you take your loved ones as well. But I made the point on social media, the fact that these people are actually not migrants. They shouldn't be labelled, as migrants or asylum seekers, because once you come into Scotland, you are Scottish, because you want to pay, you want to work, and you want to give in to the Scottish way of life. Which is fairness and equality.
So they should be welcomed, Chris.
For all.
Chris, just before we leave the topic completely, just one last thing to put to you. It strikes me here that there are similarities to the kinds of things that happened during the war, where people were actually having to be hidden so that they would not be taken by the authorities. Are we getting to the point in Glasgow now where we actually have to hide refugees to prevent the British government from snatching them?
Well, you're going down the road there of the likes of, obviously Anne Frank and all the rest of it. Thankfully we're, a long way off from that kind of caper. But my own personal view is that if Priti Patel thought that she could get away with it, then that's how migrants and refugees would be treated. But I made the point is the fact that once people come here and decide to settle in Scotland, and make that conscious decision to pay into the community, to work in the community, then we should repay them by being able to look after them, and that's why immigration law needs to be devolved to Scotland, like yesterday, because quite clearly the UK government have got no intention of doing so.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. Okay, we need to move on now to our next story. Again, staying with the election as the topic, this time the SNP says it's going to stand up for Scottish businesses. Following the launch of its business manifesto, the SNP has said that it's the only party standing up for businesses in Scotland, with bold policies that will create jobs and drive economic recovery, as well as being the only party offering a route back into the EU. The government, in the government, the SNP said that they have provided over £3 billion of pandemic support to businesses, and as Scotland's economy starts to open up again, many businesses will receive restart grants of between £7,000 and £19,500 to help them to prepare for reopening. The SNP's manifesto for business pledges the following: to continue the small business bonus scheme, which benefits more than 100,000 businesses, to invest £100 million to help small and medium enterprises to get access to the right digital skills and equipment, to support a 500% increase in the number of employee-owned businesses by 2030, and create a mechanism to support more employee buyouts. They also plan to gradually reduce the large business supplement to ensure that the largest businesses pay the same combined poundage in Scotland as in England, and to explore the possibility of levying a higher poundage on properties where the owner is registered in a tax haven, and to maintain the business growth accelerator and fresh start schemes. They're also planning to establish a £10 million fund to allow companies to pilot and explore the benefits of a 4-day working week, and to support a review in partnership with trade unions and businesses of how working practices could be adapted to meet the needs of the future economy. They're also planning to create a dedicated women's business centre backed by £50 million and £20 million rural entrepreneur fund, and to deliver a national challenge competition providing funding of up to £50 million to projects with the greatest potential to transform Scotland. They're also planning to deliver a national network of world-class facilities backed by £30 million to develop new tech startups that will grow to offer jobs, to ensure they're accessible virtually for businesses in rural areas, implement net zero data centres, and support the creation of 5G innovation hubs and districts. The SNP is also planning to increase investment to £7 billion by 25-26 through the National Infrastructure Mission, supporting 45,000 jobs, and to deliver 100,000 new homes over the next 10 years as part of a £16 billion investment. They're planning also to explore the introduction of a new national digital sales tax, a published retail strategy, help the sector thrive, build on Scotland Loves Local campaign, encouraging people to spend locally. A lot of meat here in this. I could go on, but just to name a few other policies, they're going to continue to push the UK government to secure access to the single market for those sectors currently without barriers, increase the number of trade and investment hubs, access options for direct links to international markets, and to implement our proposal for the Scottish Green Ports. So a great deal on offer there from the SNP. Alan, this is a very fulsome series of proposals which the SNP is offering. It's almost too long for me to list them this evening, and all fully funded. So there's very little here for people to sort of shake their heads and say, how are you going to fund that? It's all there in black and white, isn't it?
It's absolutely incredible, Gordon. See, when you're reading that off, I really was thinking it's practically miraculous what the SNP have been able to do and what they're planning to do, you know, with the Westminster constraints in terms of budgets that we've got, because obviously we do always return a balanced budget. No, it's superb. I also know in terms of support during the pandemic, I know from dealing with companies in my constituency and the support they were able to get, it's much more generous than what's happened down south under Westminster. There's actually the Scottish Government has provided funding for certain sectors that the UK Government didn't. So it really is amazing what can be done. There's a will, there's a way, as it were, and you can only imagine what we could do once we've got full tax powers as well as some spending powers. One thing you didn't mention also is a sustainable Scottish marketing brand. So that's also looking at protecting and promoting Scotland's food and drink. That's backed up with money as well. I suppose one other thing, just in what you read out there, which I think was important, was the 4-day working week pilot. So it's not just about supporting businesses, it's about supporting jobs, but also looking at working conditions and actually a work-life balance. And I think that's to be commended going forward as well.
Okay. Listen, thank you for that, Alan. Chris, very briefly, if you would, Alan's touched on the work-life balance there. Did you pick up on that as well when you were reading this long list of things which the SNP is planning to do?
I did, and fair play to Alan because he pretty much stole my thunder. Because I was also going to mention that the within the SNP trade union group, we are pursuing the possibility of a 4-day working week, as well as a universal basic income. And once we have that achieved, and that's not going to be achieved overnight, you know what I mean? Countless times I've been on the programme and highlighting the fact that independence isn't going to be automatically the land of milk and honey. It's going to take some hard work, and mistakes will be made along the way. But by the end of the day, if we are working towards a more sustainable future, if we add in the likes of a 4-day working week, which many of the European countries have adapted to since the 1970s and the 1980s, add that along with a well-being economy, and also a green, just transition into renewable energy, where we can find more sustainable jobs going forward. Then obviously you need a plethora of policies in order to make five or six policies come to fruition.
Well, Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there, Chris. Certainly is a plethora of policies in this for us to go over. Unfortunately, we're running a little low on time. So I'm going to rush on to the next story. And this time we're talking about Kate Forbes, the Finance Secretary, who has challenged senior Tories to explain their Thatcherite plans. Scotland's Finance Secretary, Kate Forbes, has challenged senior Tories to explain their backing for a hard-right think tank which wants to make the case for a smaller state as soon as possible, warning that this gives an insight into what the Tories have planned for Scotland's recovery from COVID-19. The Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack, is one of 5 Tory cabinet ministers who have joined a new hard-right lobby group. The other members of the group, which wants to encourage the government to resist the urge to lunge forward to solve people's problems for them, include the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, the International Trade Secretary, Liz Truss, the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, and the Work and Pensions Secretary, Theresa Coffey. The SNP has also warned that Scotland's recovery must be in Scotland's hands after it was revealed that Boris Johnson has ordered a savings and efficiency review of UK government departments ahead of the spending review. So, Alan, it looks very much as if Kate Forbes is blowing the whistle here on the potential hard right lurch for the Tory party, going back to the days of what they would call small government. In other words, us having to fend for ourselves more of the time. Does this worry you and the group of SNP MPs at Westminster?
Well, it's certainly a concern, and unfortunately it's not a surprise, especially when you look at some of the names involved. Liz Truss has long been an absolute free marketeer. Kwasi Kwarteng, he's the Bees Secretary, but he previously put his name to a book with other hard-right Tory MPs calling for, cutting workers' rights, calling for elimination of red tape. So this is actually just true to form. It's what we predicted, it's what we've said and highlighted as a concern, and unfortunately it looks as if it might come to pass. And as we all know, if Westminster make cuts down in England, it impacts the Scottish budget, and sure as anything, we'll start making cuts to the Scottish Block Grant as well.
Okay, Alan, thank you for that. There's a very clear warning there. Chris, do you share Alan's worries about what will happen to Scotland's block grant if these kinds of policies are imposed on us?
Well, definitely I do, yes. And Alan's quite right to highlight the usual suspects, possibly 5 of the more toxic cabinet members within the Tory party, who would probably die a death if they ever were confronted with a real socialist. Certainly not Sir Keir Starmer, that's for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, at the end of the day, Alan's right to point out that if there's cuts in England, and unfortunately, things tend to run downhill. And if it's cut in England, then it will get cut in Scotland. So but I mean, again, we have to just point out the wonderful, wonderful job that Kate Forbes has taken on and seems to do with without breaking sweat. She seems to always come up trumps. So and that's obviously with one hand tied behind her back. So again, it's going to be a tough gig ahead for her.
Okay, Chris, thank you for being brief there. We're going to try to catch up with a little bit more time on the next item. Now, you may be aware that college lecturers in Scotland have been on strike recently, and there is now news of a deal. The strike action at colleges across Scotland have been called off after Colleges Scotland reached a deal with the union EIS FELA. The Colleges of Scotland welcomed today's news, calling it great news for students and their lecturers, and welcomed the EIS FELA commitment to ending the strike action, which has been due to continue this week. EIS FELA General Secretary Larry Flanagan said that he believed the deal which protects the interests of lecturers and students had been offered. The lecturers have been on strike last Tuesday and Wednesday over fears that lecturer posts were being replaced by instructor roles. Colleges Scotland called this an unfounded allegation. Alan, I'll come to you first for a comment on this. It seems that a disaster has been averted here and that the unions and the employers have managed to come to an agreement. This is obviously vitally important at the moment. Many students are in the middle of exams and are waiting for the results of those, and they're worried, obviously, aren't they, about how the strike action would have affected them.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, you've always got to respect people's right to take strike action, but the strike's clearly harmful for education, and given lost time during COVID, it certainly would be a concern for students. And I know full well the college lecturers wouldn't enter such a decision lightly. So it's just good all round that a solution has been agreed and everybody can move on.
Okay. Chris, briefly, if you would, what's your reaction to the news that the strike action has been called off and a deal has been reached?
I'm really, really happy that that's been happening, or should I say that that's been announced. It was the subject of discussion at the trade union executive meeting on Monday night, where Bill Ramsey of the EIS gave an update hinting that this was possibly going to be brought to a swift resolution. And when Bill said swift, he was looking at the end of the week. So, he's come up trumps again, obviously working alongside Larry Flanagan. Yeah. And, again, I would just like to highlight to any Labour people that are tuning in is the fact that the Scottish Government do actually work with the trade unions and also the STUC, and that's contrary to what Richard Leonard used to say, and it's contrary to what Anna Salwar is saying as well.
Well, I have to admit an interest in this, Chris, because I'm old friends with Bill Ramsey and I know very well the amount of work that he's done through the EIS over the years. Anyway, I'd like to move on now, if I could. And the Electoral Commission has decided to launch an inquiry into Boris Johnson's flat refurbishment. A formal investigation into how Boris Johnson funded refurbishments to his Downing Street flat has been launched by the Electoral Commission, which said that there were reasonable grounds to suspect that multiple offences may have been committed. After reports, the Prime Minister was given a £58,000 loan from a Conservative donor and peer to help foot the bill for the redecorations to his number 11 residence, which ministers and the Tory party have not denied. The watchdog escalated its involvement an hour before Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. It has emerged that a new advisor on ministerial standards has now been picked after the role remained unfilled for months following the departure of Sir Alex Allen, who quit after Johnson overruled his finding that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, had breached the ministerial code by bullying staff. Allen's replacement has been announced as Christopher Geit, the former private secretary to the Queen for a decade until 2017. Negotiations over Lord Geit's role have been going on for some weeks. He will be tasked with an immediate inquiry into the flat refurbishment payments. Now, Alan, obviously this story has been swirling in the media for the last few days. I think it's fairly clear from the fact that the Tory party is not denying this, that there is something to this story. And I'm sure the Electoral Commission would not be bothering to investigate it if they didn't feel that there was something here to investigate.
Well, that's right. I mean, clearly the Electoral Commission would only do that if they're confident there's something to do it, especially when it's the Prime Minister. That won't be a decision taken lightly. It's incredible that during the pandemic, Boris Johnson's had a focus on the flat, and without being flippant, when you see the money that was spent on that for the return, it seems quite a ludicrous waste of money. I mean, £840 a roll of wallpaper, incredible. And it's actually one thing that's concerning as information only started to come out because of the fact that Johnson's fell out his former cohort and Dominic Cummings.
Yeah.
So if Dominic Cummings hadn't fell out and they're not fighting like ferrets in the sack, how long would this have been covered up for? There's wider ranging governance questions here to be looked at, as well as the follow the money, who paid what when.
Okay, well, I'm sure that will come out in the wash. Chris, I heard it quoted the other day from Boris Johnson's former editor, from Max Hastings, that Boris Johnson's finances were notoriously chaotic at best. And he said he wasn't surprised if Boris Johnson had to take a loan to pay for the flat refurbishment. Would you say that this is a damning indictment of Boris Johnson as a Prime Minister if he can't really even seem to manage his own finances?
I don't know if it's a damning indictment of Boris Johnson per se, because this has actually got all the hallmarks of Donald Trump. Donald Trump had financial irregularities, also had financial shortages in his own personal account. Allegedly. Yes. Allegedly. Right. Okay, I'll throw that in. But again, you go back to the cronyism. You go back to the current sleaze and all the rest of it. There's been, throughout history, sleaze has attached its ugly head to the Tory party. If it's not money, it's through sex scandals and private deals and brown envelopes and all the rest of it. And it just really begs to ask a question. What is this government going to do? What is the level of depth of depravity that this government has got to go to in order for the British electorate to wake up and smell the coffee?
Well, it does seem remarkable that people still support Boris Johnson after the sheer number of these events. Anyway, however, I have to move on, I'm afraid, and we're moving to the European Union this time, and a distrustful European Union Parliament has backed the Brexit trade deal. The European Parliament has overwhelmingly backed the post-Brexit trade deal between Britain and the European Union, clearing the last hurdle towards its ratification, whilst expressing clear mistrust of the UK government. The EMRPs cleared the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, by 660 votes to 5, with 32 abstentions, the Parliament announced after the vote. The EU Parliament's consent brings to an end over 4 years of acrimonious negotiations and debate as the UK ended 47 years of EU membership, but mistrust lingers. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, said that she warmly welcomed the vote. MEPs also voted massively in favour of an accompanying resolution in which they described Brexit as an historic mistake. The text talked of the trade deal's limited scope, with opportunities for the UK's largely service-based economy vastly reduced. The EU Parliament also condemned Britain's unilateral change in trading arrangements in Northern Ireland and urged the Commission to press on with its legal action. They also warned the European Union to be vigilant about UK government action on taxation, money laundering and the access to EU fishing boats into its waters. Alan, this is a kind of strange announcement from the EU. They're basically saying they're glad to have this over with, but at the same time, they are obviously expressing their own opinions that Britain's making an enormous mistake with Brexit. I think we may have lost Alan. Can you hear us, Alan?
Yes, we all know that they long thought the UK was making a mistake, and let's not the UK. Yeah, I hear you.
We're hearing you now, Alan.
I can still hear you.
Okay. Please continue, Alan. We are hearing your answer okay now.
Apologies for that. Okay, so yeah, the EU is basically right. The UK did make a mistake. It was absolute folly to leave the EU, and it was absolute bigger folly to leave the single market and the customs union. And it's indicative, or it's impressive. The EU have stuck to their word, so they've signed off the trade deal, and have said they're glad to sign it off. So they've stuck to their word, while the UK, as you highlighted in your reports, already breaching that in terms of unilateral the trading arrangements in Northern. And who knows what the league going to end up. And the EU are correct to highlight concerns about tax evasion. We know the UK is ploughing ahead with free ports, which actually is general of tax evasion. And given free marketeers they rip up red tape, there's a real risk that it will become a tax haven. So again, why we shouldn't be part of that.
Okay, so I'm sorry about the interference on the connection there to Westminster. We're suffering from the usual gremlins. Chris, you've heard obviously what Alan has said there. The European Union is obviously concerned that the UK, with its very limited service-based economy, predominantly in England, is now showing every sign of, it seems, wanting to become a tax haven. I mean, what else does the British government have to offer?
Not an awful lot, to be honest with you. As Alan alluded to, the free ports that are being mooted by Boris Johnson and Michael Gove as just basically, what they are. They are a money laundering service, which the Tories will use to their advantage. In stark contrast to that, in Scotland, Ivan McKee has proposed that we actually have green ports, and these jobs will be backed up by trade union intervention and representation, along with the living wage, so that any green ports within Scotland, won't be money cesspits for the rich and famous. But again, what we're also, and I'm mindful to bring this up, if you don't mind, today being National Memorial for Workers' Day, where we remember comrades that have died in service, in work, where employers have not adhered to the correct health and safety, through the likes of corporate manslaughter and all the rest of it. There was a ceremony today, as there always was, or always is, at Glasgow Green. It was attended by my good friend Scott Donoghue from Scottish Hazards, and also John Docherty from the trade union group. Yep. So, what Alan was pointing out there is, now that we are officially out of the European Union, this allows the Tories to attack the trade union bill further against your terms and conditions and workers' rights. And this is the pursuit of Little Britain, and their mendacious race to the bottom.
Okay, Chris, well, thank you for being brief with that. We're moving to Northern Ireland for our next story now, and Arlene Foster is to step down after a party revolt. Arlene Foster is to step down as Northern Ireland's First Minister at the end of June, bowing to pressure from members of her Democratic Unionist Party who are unhappy at her leadership over Brexit and social issues. Her announcement adds to instability in Northern Ireland, where angry young UK loyalists have rioted over the perceived growing power of Irish nationalists and the post-Brexit trade barriers with the rest of the United Kingdom. Foster, who has led the DUP for more than 5 years, said in a statement that she would also step down as party leader on May the 28th. She described her leadership of Northern Ireland as the privilege of her life. The announcement comes a day after a majority of DUP politicians signed a letter seeking a confidence vote in Foster amid discontent over her leadership, including her perceived mishandling of the Brexit negotiations. Alan, I think many people may have expected this because a lot of hardline unionists felt that that Arlene Foster had kind of done a deal with the devil with the Tories, and it was going to result in Northern Ireland being treated differently from the rest of the UK. Do you think this is just those chickens now coming home to roost for the Democratic Unionists?
There's no doubt chickens come home to roost, as you put it, and that's what happens when you do a deal with the Tories. It's interesting they're laying all the blame at Arlene Foster, because I'm quite sure she wasn't alone in the negotiating room with the Tories and the DUP MPs that put their faith in the UK Tory government. So it's a kind of ill men them as well. You know, they're all culpable, but I suppose sometimes for people like that, it's maybe easier to take the leader out and they hopefully save their own skins going into the election next year in Northern Ireland.
Okay, Alan, thank you for being brief. Chris, very briefly, if you would, what was your reaction to Arlene Foster's departure or her announcement of her departure today?
To be honest with you, it was one of elation. I've made no bones that, she was not a very nice character, to say the least. I think she was disingenuous in her pursuit of that power that Alan mentioned when she brokered the deal with the Tories. I think it gave the DUP carte blanche to do what they have done in the last 5 years of her tenure. There's, again, we were talking about Westminster scandal, but she was complicit herself in the whole Stormont affair, not willing to work with the other party, Sinn Féin. It'll be interesting days ahead as to see who takes this job on. Also, again, I think there's more to do with the power sharing as well, which, should be 50-50, but it's always been perceived as 60-40. And it'd be interesting to see if actually Sinn Féin take over the 60% and
end up having a first minister.
What the DUP had. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Listen, Chris, thank you for that. We're going to move on to our next story now, crossing the Atlantic to America now. Joe Biden is to push for trillions of pounds of investment. The US President, Joe Biden, plans to unveil a sweeping $1.8 trillion package for families and education in his first joint speech to Congress today, as he stresses the need to invest to compete with China. According to the White House, Biden will argue that the new package, which together with earlier infrastructure and jobs plans, totals around $4 trillion, rivaling the annual federal budget. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime investment vital to America's future. The US president will also plead directly with lawmakers to pass legislation to curb police violence, senior administration officials have said. Biden will highlight repeated police killings of black citizens and years of entrenched racism, whilst also honouring the service of the vast majority of officers. The plan includes $1 trillion in spending on education and childcare over the next 10 years and $800 billion in tax credits aimed at middle and low-income families, according to a White House fact sheet. Alan, it seems that Joe Biden is grabbing America by the scruff of the neck, isn't he? He really is going for the social ailments that have dragged America back for decades, isn't he?
Yeah, it's fantastic to see. I mean, clearly he's shown real leadership compared to his predecessor, Trump. It really, in the face of it, seems like progressive policies in terms of tax credits to help, those less well off. There's also spending in infrastructure, which clearly will help create jobs. Hopefully that will be targeted towards a green recovery. And certainly a lot of what he's doing echoes the calls the SNP made for the last budget down here at Westminster. And actually it makes our call for £100 billion worth of investment actually look quite modest in hindsight. So certainly for me, it confirms it's the right way forward in these difficult times. It's to actually make investment to create long-term growth. And that contrasts again directly to what we're talking about earlier on, where the Tories seem to be sharpening their knives to make cuts instead of doing the right thing. And only yesterday at Treasury questions, I challenged the Treasury Minister to at the very least to allow Scotland's borrowing powers to be changed so that we can actually make that type of borrowing and investment ourselves while we're still constrained by Westminster. But according to the Treasury Minister, we've got all the powers we need. So I think that shows again why we need full wider powers independence and not just be asking for changes from a Tory Westminster government.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Chris, the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom was well known for always sort of lauding whatever America does and wanting to copy whatever America does. Is there any chance they're going to copy what Joe Biden's doing?
Not at all. Not at all. Biden's. He's been lambasted for being, what America see as kind of like, having socialist tendencies. If he gets away with this, then fair play. It's not radical socialism the way that that I would want, but it's definitely making direct inroads in order to change people's lives, and especially the tax credits, which will clearly benefit the low income and middle of the range earners and stuff like that. And again, creating industry through infrastructure projects and stuff like that is definitely the way to go. You have to invest, or should I say, you have to speculate to accumulate.
Indeed.
And get that liquidity running around the country again. Because for a long time America did have that. If you go back to the mid '60s and the early '70s, America was the hive of industry, and and gradually it's gone down in recent years. But maybe Biden will change that trend. Look forward to it.
Let's hope so, Chris. On to our final story this evening, and sad news in India this evening, as Indians rush for vaccines as the coronavirus death toll tops 200,000. Indians struggle to register online for mass vaccination drive set to begin at the weekend as the country's toll in the coronavirus surged past 200,000 today, worsened by shortages of hospital beds and medical oxygen. The second wave of infections has seen at least 300,000 people test positive each day for the past week, overwhelming health facilities and crematoriums and prompting increasingly urgent response from allies overseas sending equipment. In the last 24 hours, brought 360,960 new cases for the world's largest single-day total, taking India's tally of infections to nearly 18 million. It was also the deadliest day so far, with 3,293 fatalities, carrying the death toll to 201,187. Experts believe the official tally vastly underestimates the actual toll in a nation of 1.3 billion, with Delhi state reporting one death from COVID every 4 minutes. Ambulances have been taking the bodies of COVID-19 victims to makeshift crematorium facilities in parks and parking lots, where bodies are burned in rows of funeral pyres. Now, Alan, we've all seen the images today on mainstream news of these vast arrays of funeral pyres burning day and night. This is like a scene from Dante's Inferno. It is like an apocalypse happening in India at the moment.
Yeah, it's utterly tragic. And I think it's, compounded by the fact that India's the biggest producer of vaccinations in the world, and clearly are struggling to vaccinate their own population, who are suffering in such a way. This shows the need for international collaboration in order to help India. And while the UK government started to make some moves towards that regard, and I suppose something's better than nothing, also highlights the issues in the wider sense that the UK government's cut their official development assistance budget from 0.7% GNI to 0.5%. So it just shows you how callous such a move is at these tragic times, and really do have to ask the UK government to think again on this and work with other countries in terms of rollout of the vaccine. Ultimately, protecting other countries also protects the UK, and it amazes me that some other people don't realise that, because as we know, the virus mutates, so it's a human thing, actually helping other people and saving lives, but ultimately it's helping protect the rest of the world against COVID as well.
Okay, Alan, thank you very much. Chris, very briefly, if you would, I just wanted to say to you, obviously, that Scotland has very strong ties with India, and there's a very large Indian community in every part of Scotland, virtually. And we're hearing stories every day of these communities getting together to try to do whatever they can for their families, their loved ones, and their friends back in the old country. Have you had any experience of what's been going on in that community, Chris, yourself?
Honestly, I haven't. I've been, sadly caught up in the campaign for Eastwood and stuff like that, trying to do
Of course, with the election,
all that I can there. But obviously the Don Raid and the trade union issues have taken pretty much most of my week this week. But I'm more than assured that the wider Asian community within Scotland, be they Hindis or Sikhs or Indians, Pakistanis, they will all rally round, in order to help India out at this time of crisis. And what really struck me, what I really just really stuck in my throat was the fact that Boris Johnson was actually trying to attempt to slap himself in the back by saying that the UK had sent 100 ventilators, and and I'm like, 100, 100.
Yeah.
It's not 100 they need. It's more like 10,000, if not more.
Yep.
100,000, and all those ventilators that were procured by through his pal Dyson and whatnot, and what have you, at a time where Scotland is actually in the process of rolling down the Louisa Jordan, we should be looking to actually get these onto aircraft and see, what excess equipment that Scotland has,
Yeah.
and actually send them over to India with a massive big saltire saying, with
With love from Scotland.
grateful thanks and solidarity from Scotland.
Well, Chris, look, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Perhaps the Scottish Government will respond to this crisis in due course. But that's about all we have time for this evening. It just remains for me to remind everybody that, of course, Broadcasting Scotland is in the middle of a big crowdfunder at the moment. And of course, we need your help to keep making programmes like the one you're watching tonight. So if you'd like to become a regular supporter of Broadcasting Scotland for just £5 a month, you can do that by following the instructions on your screen now. You can also make individual donations, and you can volunteer to help us at the studio. But I'd just like to say thank you both to Alan Brown, MP down in Westminster. Thanks very much, Alan, for joining us this evening, and Chris McCusker for being my guest this evening. And wish you all a very good evening. I'll see you next time on Scotland at 7. Thank you both.